Boris Johnson is bracing for a cabinet uproar as 4 ministers expressed their outrage over Dominic Cummings' failure to resign, BBC's Laura Kuntzberg has revealed. Speaking on the coronavirus newscast, the BBC political editor revealed 4 cabinet ministers told her they were furious over Boris Johnson's chief aide's actions. Over 40 Tory MPs have publicly called for Dominic Cummings to resign, but Laura Kuntzberg claimed the number of Tories sharing the sentiment behind the scenes was a lot higher. She warned, at the beginning, the vast majority of people were saying I cannot believe this, and then as the anatomy of things moves on, people start to say all right, can you crack on now? But the political point is a real one, and I think there has been a fracture over this between the Prime Minister's team at Number 10 and the rest of the Tory party. I'm not minimizing the public's feeling about it, but from a political point of view it's not just going to disappear because it's really soured relationships between Number 10 and some of the MPs. That's a problem. Even when you've got an 80-seat majority, you still have to have your troops on side. She added, publicly, more than 40 Tory MPs said he should resign. The number behind the scene is a lot bigger than that. And a lot of people in the cabinet are really furious. 4 cabinet ministers said to me in one day this week that he should resign. One of them was hardly speaking. He said, I cannot tell you how angry I am. And it tells you a lot about this administration that they can have cabinet rage, 40 members of their own party going public saying he should quit, and be like nah. In a bid to move on from the continuing row over his chief aide Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister declined to answer questions on the issue at the daily briefing in Downing Street on Thursday. Mr. Cummings is accused of breaking lockdown rules by travelling from London to County Durham, but he has denied any wrongdoing and has received the full backing of Boris Johnson. Cummings travelled from London to the northern English city of Durham in March with his 4-year-old son and his wife, who was sick at the time, to be close to relatives. Durham Constabulary said on Thursday Mr. Cummings may have committed a minor breach of coronavirus lockdown rules when he drove the 50-mile round trip to Barnard Castle, but added it did not intend to take retrospective action. Later on Thursday, Mr. Johnson avoided answering questions about Mr. Cummings and stepped in when questions were asked of his chief medical and scientific advisors, Professor Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance respectively, to stop them being dragged into a political argument. Mr. Johnson refused to answer the question from the BBC, which referenced how Durham police would have sent Mr. Cummings home had officers seen him at Barnard Castle. He subsequently stopped Professor Whitty and Sir Patrick from answering the question directed at him. Mr. Johnson said, I've said quite a lot on this matter already, and I also noticed that Durham police said that they were going to take no action and that the matter was closed. I intend to draw a line under the matter. He continued, I know that you've asked Chris and Patrick, but I'm going to interpose myself if I may and protect them from what I think would be an unfair and unnecessary attempt to ask a political question. It's very, very important that our medical officer and scientific advisors do not get dragged into what most people would recognize as fundamentally a political argument. Mr. Johnson was then told by ITV that a number of scientific advisors to the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, SAGE, have said that Mr. Cummings' behavior risked more people not complying with social distancing rules. One of those advisors, social psychologist Professor Stephen Riker, who is on the Independent Scientific Pandemic Influenza Group on Behaviors which passes its advice to SAGE, said earlier this week that Mr. Johnson had trashed their advice. In response to the question, Mr. Johnson repeated his earlier statement of wanting to protect the advisors from being dragged into political controversy and described the matter as a distraction. We want to get some very clear and simple messages across to the British public, Mr. Johnson said. What they want to hear is what we are doing to tackle coronavirus and what the plan is. We've announced a huge amount today and I think people need to focus on those messages.